This is Blacklisted Radio. It's the 31st day of May, the last day of May, 2014. My name is Doug Owen. It's good to be with you here live at blacklistedradio.com. If you're available Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, we do this thing live. You can also follow me on Twitter at BLN Radio. And, of course, everything that you need to be part of the show with is located at blacklistedradio.com. All right, getting a late start to the show today. That's okay. It's going to be pretty jam-packed, and there's a lot of things that are not being covered in the alternative media. We are going to fill in the gap. The Bilderberg coverage. Have you been keeping up with Bilderberg in Denmark? The coverage of the coverage of the coverage is what we will be doing with Bilderberg. I find it to be kind of enigmatic now at this point that so many people are, I don't know, excited about these top secret meetings. Bilderberg, that's why it stands out. It's because it's completely secret, and the meetings that are held are somewhat homoerotic. Let's get right to it. Have you seen the video that some of the independent people out there, the media, the stopgap media, there we go, have been putting out there? Pretty creepy. It's just a lot of old guys getting together, and, you know, I don't know what they're doing, but they're all in robes, and they are up in the hotel room, and they're really, I think, kind of, they seem to be having a good time. I don't really know what to glean from it. General Petraeus, the head of NATO, people that are on the ground and instrumental in what's happening in the Ukraine, are meeting at the conclave in Denmark where the Bilderberg 2014 meeting is happening. So a lot of coverage of that. I think that maybe you get a little bit too much coverage, and too much goes into the agenda, what they're doing. You know, and don't get too excited about what the global rulers behind closed doors are planning, or maybe the leaks that the general media, the alternative media, receive, because they're not really that accurate. A lot of people thought that Mitt Romney going to Bilderberg was a sure sign that he was going to be the president of the United States. Not so much. Same thing with Rick Perry when he traveled to Turkey to go to the Bilderberg meeting. And people did call into local media to talk about the Logan Act. It is illegal in the United States if you're a public representative, if you're a government official, to meet behind closed doors with other governments and banking institutions. And, for obvious reasons, because we want to make sure that whoever is doing our bidding, wink, wink, is open and honest and transparent with the decisions that they are making, and they're not being influenced by power elite from other countries. You know, you don't want Rick Perry making some sweetheart deal for cash and selling the sovereignty of the Texans to China at some meeting. Now, if you see Rick Perry in the headlines meeting with Chinese premiers and with other investment funds and managers that are doing this, then you can obviously make that analysis and say, well, look, Rick Perry's obviously selling us down the river. So, I mean, that's the crux of it. I mean, the secrecy surrounding it and how I think it pretty much points to the sexual nature of it, just like the Bohemian Grove, as Richard Nixon pointed out. It's just a bunch of gay guys, just a bunch of queers hanging out. And it's not to disparage gay people. It's not to really even disparage those that participate in the meetings. I'm sure many people are just invited, and it's kind of an honor to find out that you've been selected to go to some secret meeting. I get that. I try not to indict everyone, but, as far as the analysis, the leaked agendas, what Bilderberg is deciding behind closed doors, and the assumption that those decisions are actually going to steer global government, global policy, maybe just a little overblown. Anyway, one of the things that I think we would be remiss for not talking about is something that Bill Gertz at the Washington Post, I know, before you get going, he is bringing up something that we've talked about for a long time here on this broadcast. That is martial law, a state of emergency. Obama considered using the U.S. government, using the FBI and even the other agencies underneath the Pentagon, really, against the Bundy militia. So let's just talk about directive number 3025.18. People will be talking about this, I think, a lot more in the weeks to come, but there's other fanfare. There's other things happening that take away from these stories. One of the troubling aspects of the directive is that it actually outlines presidential authority for the use of military arms and forces, including unarmed drones, wink, wink, once more, in the operations against domestic unrest. Now, this goes back to 1967. This is, well, maybe much, I'm sure, broader, farther back than really that. But LBJ using the, what was it, the Colonel Commission? I'm trying to think now. I was just reading about this the other day. But basically, preparing the police departments across the nation for martial law, unrest, civil disturbances. And there was a lot of them. We had over 100 times that the U.S. military engaged the people in this country, mostly civil rights groups and black nationalist leaders and mob riots that popped up in places like Detroit, but also the building of the apparatus to quell domestic unrest. Part of the job of the police department, you would think that, this kind of makes sense, that part of their job would be to have the awareness to know if there's going to be a riot. If their job is to protect property and life, of course, do they do a good job at that? And is that really the agenda? Usually not, but that is the job of the police. That is their role in our society, the way it's currently structured today. And it would be remiss if they did not prepare for potential riots and unrest that could destroy cities and have over and over and over again in this country's history. The labeling of people as domestic terrorists. And, of course, with the recent passage, once again, the 2014 NDAA, re-solidifying the government's ability to take away your right as a human being, beyond destroying Magna Carta, taking your right away as a citizen, your citizenship. And I think that is a right, if you're born in this country, to have citizenship, currently under the structure that we live under. Some of you probably don't like the anchor baby laws and other things that are putting pressure on the economy domestically, and there's plenty of those stories that we highlight at blacklistednews.com. But nonetheless, that is the government's role, to protect you and your property from hordes. Now, does that negate posse comitatus? Posse comitatus, if you just read the law, has been, subverted so many times that it's almost a moot point to bring that into the discussion, because at the end of the day, the government does whatever it wants. And using the military against the population has happened in the past and potentially in the future. It's only now, because things have been relatively stable and people have been relatively disconnected from the reality on the ground, that we have this belief or feeling that these things are kind of impossible, that we're beyond martial law, we're beyond having the population rise up unanimously against the current government. So anyway, the story goes, and why it's being highlighted is that the Obama administration, according to a release, considered but rejected deploying military force under the directive during the recent standoff with Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy and his armed supporters. So the story about the Clive and Bundy Ranch is far from over. Don't take my word for it. Take Harry Reid's. Take the Justice Department's. They're saying that these guys are domestic terrorists and they will be dealt with. But they're just giving them enough time for the probably infiltrators, the FBI, and other agencies on the ground. Who knows who might actually be there? Even private agencies, private militia, private contractors pretending to be militia. How many of them are actually just making cases for a huge indictment and a raid on the Bundy Ranch? It only stands to reason that that's what's happening now, and that's why they're just letting these guys put the noose around their necks. As far as I'm sure they're doing things that are in the gray area of the law, and the FBI will make a case, regardless of how weak it is. At some point, they're going to get some warrants and execute those under the cover of night, and they're just buying their time. I mean, time is on the government side. They are not pressed to push this issue, and they're not. It's not in their best interest, really, either, because there are BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, land grabs currently underway in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. Huge water rights issues are being raised due to droughts across the country, and the BLM is going to be there along with a lot of other fish and game agencies to take on farmers. It's only a matter of time before more and more of these issues. And we saw a lot of more attention to the BLM and their misdeeds, and even people that are very prominent, that are well quoted, people like Ron Paul and other people, the libertarian side of the Republican Party, even the Nevada governor, raising a lot of issues about what the U.S. government's doing, their role, and what it should be with the Bureau of Land Management. It brings up the militarization of all of these agencies, from the USPS to the what was the latest? I'm trying to think. They were giving a bunch of guns to some group. The USDA, or it was the it was the USDA, wasn't it? I can look it up. Anyway, you got to wonder, what's their role? What will they be doing? And why do they need so much ammunition? I mean, it only makes sense. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not trying to scare people. It's just a plan. It's just a contingency that the federal government has. And as more and more of these gates and waterways get shut to farmers, to longtime ranchers with ties back to the land, family ties as far back as hundreds of years, it's going to get messy. And usually these things are done under the cover of night. You get ranchers or farmers or homeschoolers, whoever it may be that's targeted for whatever reason. I mean, they get bullied by the government, and it used to be very easy for the government to just kind of run roughshod over these people. I mean, this is an ongoing plan that's been happening with the BLM. It is for at least 30 years since its inception. So the government is not keen to bring a lot of attention to it, and I think that's why they're trying to make the Clive and Bundy issue a back burner. Now, Bill Gertz, the guy who wrote this for the Washington Post, is an interesting character, and he's a big-time neocon and a person that has a lot of interesting ties, so you can look into him. But this directive, DOD directive, that Obama, according to Gertz, used or was contemplating using, 3025-18, is pretty self-evident that the whole idea of posse comitatus is gone. But we're talking about some pretty, I think, unprecedented uses of technology and the federal government against people, individuals. I mean, even LBJ used the National Guard, and they didn't go after they didn't have the Pentagon targeting U.S. citizens. Potentially, if they consider them to be domestic terrorists under NDAA, they can strip them of their citizenship and all of their right under the Constitution and Bill of Rights. The government doesn't want to be forthcoming with this legal. This is how just out of left field we really are, or out in left field we really are. We have the Obama administration using a secret interpretation of the Patriot Act, the secret portions of the Patriot Act, maybe DOD Directive 3025 as a way to use drones to kill U.S. citizens. But they don't want to tell us about this legal. They don't want to be forthcoming with their legal analysis and the justification for why they believe it is okay. And if you just think about that with a little common sense, and you're not tied to some political party or some cult of personality like Barack Obama or whoever follows him, you have to come to the conclusion that it just doesn't make a lot of sense. If you wanted to be completely, I just imagine if I was doing something illegal, potentially illegal, right here where I live, Round Rock, Texas, and you have a guy that's potentially facing a life sentence for pot brownies, pot cookies. And you just see the full force of the idiocy of government at work. We're talking about a 19-year-old guy that is faced for giving people pot cookies, delivering them. I mean, what a service. Facing charges that would land him a harsher sentence than aggravated murder. You can rape people. You can do a lot of things that are abhorrently bad. And, a pot cookie, that's way worse. Way, 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 way worse. And if you think about it for a moment, it's because the government is hell-bent, just to go on a tangent, hell-bent about keeping you in this reality. I don't understand it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I've thought a lot about it. I don't know why the government is so invested in making sure that you do not feel some kind of altered state due to changing the chemical makeup of your brain even momentarily. And I just don't understand why they're so vested in it. Anyway, there's probably a lot more to that, and the fact that they use drugs and have for the last 100 years plus to create budgets for the CIA and other black operations the government doesn't want to talk about, just like their secret interpretation of the Patriot Act or other DOD directives that, this is the directive. It doesn't mean that it's legal. It doesn't mean that there won't be some kind of ramification. We have the link here, and I'll put it in the chat room at blacklistedRadio.com. Let's see. Go ahead and do that now. There are people there hanging out during the live broadcast that bring a little levity and some interesting perspective to the show. There we go. All right. So, big directive really does highlight what the government is up to. And I think it's proof positive that the government is planning and spending more time getting ready to engage the populace. Last week, we noted that the NSA, more interested in protecting Israel. The Pentagon, more interested in domestic terrorists or anybody that they can put that label on that is a rabble-rouser, that is causing trouble, causing people to question what's happening in the world today. It is, let's see, is there anything else here? Yeah, just some of the other things that Obama has said here that I thought were kind of noteworthy. Here's a quote from Obama just a few years ago, just 1 year ago. Quote, "I do not believe it would be constitutional for the government to target and kill any U.S. citizen with a drone or with a shotgun without due process, nor should any president deploy armed drones over U.S. soil." Now, you can find, hundreds of quotes from Barack Obama where he's had a change of heart. I mean, here's just a future assessment think tank that is being created. The House Defense Authorization Bill passed last week without much fanfare, calls for adding $10 million to the Pentagon's Future Warfare think tank and for codifying the Office of Net Assessment, ONA, as a semi-independent unit. So what's the Office of Net Assessment? It's assessing you, people in the chat room, myself, and figuring out whether or not you're a threat. How many of you out there can change somebody's mind? Maybe you don't think that, that the system's legitimate. You are a rabble-rouser, and they need to come up with a plan. Now, the Pentagon has used other plans like Project Megiddo. I've mentioned it several times to get people up in arms and to use a lot of political platforms as steam valves for anger. And they've co-opted and COINTELPRO'd plenty of those people that, Occupy is a perfect example, just one of many groups that the government has spent a lot of time chasing and building cases against. And it's because the Occupy movement threatens the liberal base of the New World Order, if you will. It threatens the people that usually subscribe to, taking away people's property rights, being anti-gun right, anti-Second Amendment, wanting more power given to the federal government to go after the fat cats. And you know that, most of you listening know that is pretty ridiculous. Asking the government to help you. Okay, number one, never trust the government when it comes to you and says, we're here to help. And number two, don't go asking the government for different ways to solve petty problems that you have individually, because they are more than happy to do it, always. So anyway, this is just, I think, highlighting what the U.S. government thinks that they need to handle the U.S. population. The provision is being called the Andrew Marshall Amendment to the ONA's longtime director and reflects congressional support for the 92-year-old manager and his staying power through numerous administrations, Republican and Democrat. This guy's, he's a bigwig. It's one of those people you just don't hear a lot about, Andrew Marshall. Mr. Marshall's opponents within the Pentagon and the Obama administration persuaded Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel this year to downgrade the ONA by cutting its budget and placing it under control of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. The ONA is currently a separate entity within the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and it's an independent group, and that's why not just you, but the Obama administration has been hell-bent on putting these groups under their thumb and doing a pretty good job at it. Anyway, that's what's happening on the home front here as far as martial law and the state of emergency and directive number 3025.18. You'll probably hear a lot more about, but because at some point this Clive and Bundy thing's going to come to a head as the economy continues to wither, when we see all of these green sprouts, or the green shoots rather, turning quite brown, when we lose what's left of the service-based economy, people are going to freak out, and the government's preparing for them. That's why I think it's important to kind of counter this, or at least talk about it, because the listeners of this show won't be caught off guard. You won't be surprised. Oh my God, I can't believe the government's using drones against civilians. Yeah, you're going to be ahead of the game buying your own drone shield. All right, drone. Blah, 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 blah. The Iron Dome. That's what I was thinking about, because I'm going to talk about Israel. Okay, so this article came out, and I think it's pretty interesting, and it highlights what's happening with the Edward Snowden case. I think it's the backstory to the divide between the CIA and the NSA. And, people often give Israel so much credit for being, behind every false flag or event deemed to be a false flag that has happened over the last decade. So Israel's been taking a lot of hits. I wanted to mention this. There's an article out from the Times of Israel Daily saying, according to a new book that's about to hit the shelves in the UK, Israel eavesdropped on phone conversations between Bill Clinton and the late Syrian leader Hafez Assad during sensitive peace negotiations between Israel and Syria in 1999. The allegations in the book, reported by Newsweek on Friday, are the latest in a series of reports regarding Israeli spying on U.S. targets. The report has been vehemently rejected by Israel. Imagine that, and largely dismissed by American officials. The new book, however, by British Israeli political scientist Aaron Bergman, cites purported verbatim transcripts of the Clinton-Assad calls, which he says he obtained through private sources. All right, so pretty big deal here. Means that Israel's quite aware of what is happening on the ground and that they are recording our politicians. So what does that mean? Obviously, it means that Israel is too powerful. Too powerful. If you don't have any kind of separation between Israel and the politic body in the United States, a lot of even the neocons that use Israel and at least publicly support Israel are, compromised. And that's the way these people see it. I mean, it's about power. Power is all about leverage, whether it's banking power, that would be cocaine. Banking powder is cocaine. Whether it's bankers' power, Wall Street's power, hedge fund managers' power, your personal power, it's usually about leverage, having something that you can lever over somebody else. In the job market, do you have skills that other people do not have, and are you willing to lend those skills, provide those skills and services for a price that is reasonable or better than others? And that's really what it comes down to when it comes to politics and spying. Whoever has the information, the knowledge, has the power, or can at least have the power. And I think that this ongoing attack against Israel, and it's multifaceted. I mean, we're seeing the diversion, the separation, and even the media playing its role when John Kerry talks about apartheid states, and when he talks about how the Israelis destroyed all peace negotiations between the Palestinians, and they continue to push the boundaries of agreed treaties, and they have continued to militarize the Palestinian state and creating more and more barriers to peace. These are important words, and they're not just lost on the liberals and other Democrats that support and may in the future support a Kerry campaign. But, that divide and separation is obvious. You have a lot of political groups and nonprofits that disparage what's happening and often point the finger at Israel. And here's just a few others. I mean, they have this flotilla that the Mossad obviously bombed. And let me see, I thought I had it in my notes here, but it's just one of many of the things that are kind of brewing in the background. That the flotilla, how do I spell flotilla? Flotilla? Maybe it's already made it to the back page. Hold on. Anyway, Israel, this flotilla that was going to Palestine was bombed. And it's really... Okay, there it is. International arrest warrant sought for Israeli commandos over raid on Gaza flotilla. And it's not so much the fact that people want to go after Israel or that this is a story. It's really the media coverage. Common Dreams here bringing this up. In addition to ordering their arrest, the court requested Interpol red notices for these men. Monday ordered, Turkish court ordered arrest warrants for 4 former Israeli military commanders for their role in the deadly 2010 raid on Gaza-bound humanitarian ship. So, and recently there was another flotilla that was bombed, and it gets a lot of press on the left. You see the alt media has no interest in these stories, and I think that there's a reason for that. I'm not sure why, but that other than, a lot of people are looking to get lots of clicks, and there's definitely an agenda to only focus on Obama and blaming the current regime for everything that has gone wrong in foreign and economic policy in this country over the last, 7 years? Let's see, I could do the math. 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 6 years. 2 more to go, or 1.5, with the Obama administration that will be carted off, and whoever comes about will give them blanket immunity for their past indiscretions and for their war crimes that have been conducted. Anyway, this just goes back into the bag with Israel here and some of the more international attention and press that they're getting. Of course, Henry Kissinger, I note this often, said that Israel would not exist in 10 years. So this quote from Henry Kissinger himself is at least a year or two old. And so we're on this progression towards maybe eliminating the state of Israel. If you believe that, you got to wonder, number one, who does Henry Kissinger speak for and talk to? And why would the dissolvement of Israel benefit those in power, the New World Order? And it might just be an eyesore and something that they need to get rid of. The Brussels Jewish Museum. Here's another story you're not going to hear really covered anywhere else with much integrity. There's plenty of people that blame everything on Mossad. There's plenty of people that will scream pretty much blanketly for any wrongdoing in the world on Judaism. But there are people that are really high up, like intelnews.org. Joseph Fitzsenekas, I can't say his name correctly. It's Fitzsenekas. He's a writer and a longtime insider in Washington. And he has a blog, intelnews.org, and usually has some insider information and stories that pretty riveting and most of the time end up to be accurate. So this is what he's saying. Belgian police investigating last weekend's shooting spree at a Jewish heritage center in Brussels do not rule out the possibility that the attack may have been part of an intelligence operation directed against Israeli agents. The incident occurred on Saturday at the Musée Juif de Belgique, I think, maybe, possibly, located in the heart of Belgium's capital. A man wearing a dark-colored jacket, baseball cap, and sunglasses walked into the museum in broad daylight, pulled out a Kalashnikov rifle in a bag, and opened fire, killing 3 people. A 4th person remains in critical condition. Observers initially classified the shooting as anti-Semitic attacks. Right. It's a hate crime. There is speculation, however, that the bloody assault may have been a target assassination that was part of a wider intelligence war between Israel, Iran, and the Lebanese-based Shiite militant group Hezbollah. Several counterterrorism experts, including Claude Monet, the co-director of European Strategic Intelligence and Security Center, have expressed that the shooter appeared to be a trained professional, referring to publicly available surveillance footage and the shooting itself. Now you have to wonder, who is this professional shooter and what are his ties? And it's pretty interesting that they are directly going after these Israeli spies at some Jewish museum. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, the story and how it all plays out and why you have these intelligence operators in Belgium, actually in Brussels, the heart of the New World Order, at the Jewish Museum. But a lot of questions. So Intel News kind of bringing this out and what may be part of a larger intelligence war that's going on. And the attack on some of these very powerful people in Israel only raises more questions for me. I know a lot of people, I've said this over and over again, think that, living in Israel would be a really good deal and that there's a lot of people that are going to bail out of the United States and go there. And I saw this article and it makes me wonder about where'd it go? Hunger strikes. Yeah, they got hunger strikes going on. About what's really happening there. Anyway, the reports, Michael Snyder brought this out and said that, or highlighted this new initiative to basically phase out paper money in Israel. And Israel's interesting in that the population is kind of tied to this well, it's a religious doctrine. Number one, they want a Judaic state, but also they are under constant attack. They are constantly being bombarded with rockets and the like. So the actual Jewish domestic Israeli population lives under constant fear. And if you look at some of the horrific things that get passed on and are allowed to happen in Jerusalem and throughout Israel, it's because the population is constantly being bombarded. But they themselves, I mean, you have a lot of people that, tens of thousands of them, they'll march against the apartheid, that support Palestinian rights, that want to see a real two-state or even one-state solution. And so there's a lot of Jewish people and people living in Israel that are opposed to what the Israeli state's doing. Now, they would like you to think that that's not happening at all and do their best to use the controlled U.S. mainstream media from discussing said topic, and for obvious reasons. But, the rounding up of 30,000 black Jews and taking away their nationality and stripping them of citizenship and sending them off to Africa. I mean, this is an apartheid state. I mean, the stuff that's happening in Israel is just beyond the pale. But the people there that live there are, they're being pushed into this digital panopticon, and they are just one of the many facets of that is having a totally digital currency. I always thought that Japan would be the first to embrace a totally digital, cashless society control grid. But the people of Israel may get it first. And one of the things I just thought was really interesting is that with this kind of, we've seen the state abuse, the using of state force against everyone in Israel. And with that kind of power and with that just total lack of accountability, how you would think that they wouldn't use this new tool to strip people of their money, it's beyond me. And because they're doing it. And that's why I think a lot of things are happening there. They're transforming, and the Likud party and other crazy neocon zealots definitely placate and pander to the Israeli lobby, and they have a lot of power in the U.S., and I think some of that is diminishing. I think we're seeing that with the CIA, with the NSA, and this transformation, and why all of these news stories are coming to light. Sorry, I'm a skeptic. Sorry, I'm not buying into everything that people want me to on the Edward Snowden story. One thing I did think was interesting that's well worth noting here is that Snowden's comments on 9/11 were completely censored. And, it's a 4-hour interview. Some things are going to hit the cutting room floor. But it's important to note that, and he says here, he paraphrases and talks about the big haystack. Not that we didn't have the haystack, but to paraphrase, but that we couldn't find the needle. That it wasn't that we didn't have enough information. We knew about all of the plotters. Some of them were doing business with the Bush family. Some of them were sleeping just doors away from FBI handlers. Some of them, like Muhammad Atta, were receiving cash from the Pakistani ISI and had no religious reasoning for doing what they were doing because they did not subscribe to any kind of religious laws. The fat bin Laden with the golden ring highlights, why it's not a religious jihad. Obviously, it's a business plan. If they were the culprits, if they were the people that were responsible and ultimately carried out those attacks. Not because of jihad. I'll tell you what, I mean, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that if you go and hang out at strip clubs and imbibe in alcohol, cocaine, and wear gold, that you're not a Muslim. It's just, you're not. You're not a good one anyway. You're a really bad Muslim, and you're probably not killing people for Allah. Now, why? Obviously, there has to be more to it. It can't just be, well, we just hate America. People don't just blow things up because they feel bad. Especially, I mean, you might have one person that does that because they're crazy, but you don't have 20 people that get together for no reason other than they just hate somebody and conduct something so heinous, so organized, that would require so much money, time, and effort. And why has the U.S. government done everything it can to not find who is culpable and finding those financial ties? Why is it so disinterested? 2 reasons. 1, it was involved. 2, it would show that the war on terror, the $1 trillion apparatus that has been built for the entire military-industrial complex, all of the massive looting of the Pentagon, wasn't justified and wasn't necessary. And it would completely destroy all of the mythos that we have around the war on terror. So either way, it's very damaging to the state. Inside job, outside job, it doesn't matter. It destroys the narrative. If you really look into it, it destroys the solutions, the pre-planned, rubber-made, rubber-stamped solutions, and the wars that were going to be perpetrated, that were planned in advance, that the U.S. government was just looking for a reason to conduct. It takes all of that away, takes all of that off the table. So it's not to say that I don't believe the conspiracy theory of the U.S. government, because I don't. Because, I mean, the 9/11 commissioners themselves don't buy into their own commission. They have categorically said now that they were lied to, that Cheney and Bush would not testify under any kind of under law or perjury of law. They did not swear these people in, tons of them, not just Bush and Cheney. So the whole thing was just a farce, regardless. So it's not to empower those people in government that are using the war on terror and using really 9/11 to justify that. And still to this day, saying that over and over again. Well, we invaded Iraq because we thought they had weapons of mass destruction. I mean, we're not invading Denmark. We're not invading Russia. We're not invading lots of other countries that have weapons of mass destruction under that definition. So, anyway, they selected not to talk about that. Why? It's pretty obvious. Because all of the things that are used to justify the spying and the intelligence apparatus that has the Pentagon garnering so much power and cash money and all of the privatization of the military, they're not going to say, well, it wasn't that we didn't have enough information. It's, that we just couldn't really see through it. The politics of it. That no one wanted to investigate or look at bin Laden's ties because he and his family were tied to the Bush administration. And it was unpopular, and they were making a lot of money. I mean, that's me softballing it as much as possible. That is me couching it as friendly as possible. This is what you do when you're talking to somebody who is a skeptic. you couch it as much as possible, and you look at all of the obvious failures and the lies, the absolute in-your-face overt lies that are used to continue to keep people in the dark about those events. So I'm just giving you some talking points for your next cocktail party where you can drop some 9/11 truth on people and they're not going to throw their Chardonnay in your face. They'll get pretty upset about Israel, though. So anyway, and the fact that the government doesn't want to talk about this there's just not much coverage of what happened in Brussels and really the backstory and looking into these people and who benefited is in their own interest. Obviously. All right. Let's talk about Big Banker. Big Banker, I mean, it goes beyond just the federal government, the Pentagon, Northcom and AFRICOM and CENTCOM and the NRO, the GAO, all of these groups the Government Accountability Office, somewhat independent, they'll be infiltrated soon. But all of these agencies that are becoming more prevalent in our lives. It's also the private industries, big data and Big Banker. So you'll like this one. New federal database will track Americans' credit ratings and other financial information. As many as 227 million Americans may be compelled to disclose intimate details of their families and financial lives, including their Social Security numbers, in a new national database assembled by two federal agencies, the FHFA agency and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, posted an April 16th Federal Register notice of the expansion of their joint national mortgage database program to include personally identifiable information that reveals actual users, a reversal of previously stated policy. So they want to know everything about you, and this is going to be really your ID to do business. It's beyond the mark of the beast. It's evil. It's more evil than the mark of the beast. The Federal Housing Agency and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, these are guys that are going to be getting weapons, and they are going to be deputized under the DOD. You don't want to make your mortgage payment? Well, shouldn't have got that FHA loan. We're going to come and throw a flash grenade into your house. The FHFA will manage the database and share it with the CFPB. See, the problem here is that when you have these grandiose databases, there's plenty of people in government, just like in Florida with the DMV, fine example, that see the opportunity to make money for themselves. People can't help it. It's not to disparage the agencies. People get into these agencies. They can't help it. It's like the guy that works for TSA that just can't help but to steal your luggage. 10% of people are just going to get that into that position and see that, that they can gain some kind of financial advantage by stealing stuff from you or whoever, or the government, which ultimately steals from you. So, it's just, how do I say this? It's just always the case. It's just a natural norm. And if there's and I hate to say that corruption is a natural norm, but if you accept that corruption is the natural norm, then you'll understand why you don't want to give too much power to the government, why you have to have people that are not invested in it actually being the watchdogs over said, the aforementioned it, whether it's the CFPB, Department of Homeland Security, name whatever agency you want that's sharing information about people. There's always going to be somebody there that's going to be selling that information to who? Big data, lots of money. They want to know everything about you. If you're a homeowner, they want to sell you new cabinets, or maybe tell you how you're going to enrich your life by getting, the granite countertops matching in the bathroom and in the kitchen and in the foyer. It's the stuff that people want. Governments and private corporations working together to really fleece the American people. It's nothing new. Anyway, in a May 15th letter, going back to Big Banker and their new database and other things that nobody else is talking about, the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008, this is what really engendered it. Critics, the FHA or FHFA officials claim the database is essential to conducting a monthly mortgage survey required by this act of 2008, and it helped prepare an annual report for Congress. So here you go. The government needs more information. Why did this fail? We're so out to lunch. We're so stupid. Why don't you just create a database? This is all in ultimately the hunt to have new pie charts to look at meetings. Why? And this is what happens when you have the U.S. government being the best mortgage lender of last resort. The FHA, Federal Housing Authority, is giving you loans. Not you, maybe, but everyone. I have a government home loan. Now, luckily for you out there, the taxpayers, I will make my mortgage payment. I'm going to try my best anyway, and the government is going to get a lot of interest money. They're going to go to town on me and you and most people because of usury, because you buy an $80,000 home, if you can find one at that price that's not in a completely blighted area, and you're going to pay back $300,000 plus. It's not a bad investment in fleecing the American people and giving them low interest loans. Now, if you don't pay the government, at some point they could put you in prison. That's why it's kind of scary to think that they're the best lender, the most reasonable one, if you don't have money. But that's when people go to government. When they don't have money, they want to generate some. Anyway, this is just one of the many things that has happened. And people don't see the big brother aspect of something like the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008. And just one of these things that's not often talked about, but has a huge blueprint or footprint into our day-to-day lives. It creates a blueprint for the bankers as well. So you have that big banking, big government working together, and that doesn't probably surprise a lot of you, nor should it. But I wanted to mention this. This is just one of many things that they're doing to collate a complete digital dossier on you. And this is actually, I think, it affects people even more than maybe even being put on the no-fly list or being deemed a domestic terrorist. But that is going to converge. You can't, because at some point you're going to hear this. Okay, this is my prediction. How come we're giving all these domestic terrorists home loans? That doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't make any sense to anybody. It's a great question. Why? Why? Well, we'll just have to combine the Department of Homeland Security Terrorist Watch List database with the new federal database that's going to be tracking their credit ratings and other financial information. And this would be a great way to catch somebody because, you want to get bin Laden or his crony. Well, at some point he's going to go to Aaron's or one of these rent-a-centers and try to get a dishwasher or, a new dryer. And voila, you find him there trying to get some credit. Credit checks are a great way to track the American people. They see it. They're not stupid. All right, I want to talk about Google for a moment here and just kind of expand upon big data. One of the things I thought was pretty interesting now is that Google, if you haven't heard about this, will be removing Europeans from search results upon request. New guidelines and rules will allow people to remove themselves from the matrix, from Google. Now, and some of you could say, well, man, that's great, man. All these kids that are just saying stupid stuff and putting poster or, pictures of themselves in all sorts of compromising positions, drunk as crap, falling over, half naked, or worse, usually way worse. They can save their reputations. They can get off of the matrix or out of the system. And that's one of the big, profound worries that Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google, had mentioned just not even probably a year ago, that kids would have to change their names, that they would have to, that 90% of people on the internet are unemployable. Regardless of your credit rating, somebody can just Google you, find out everything they need for a lot of people that are just way too excited to share everything that they have with the world, with Google. But it's much more sinister than that. So I could see that being a benefit to society and to people that have made bad decisions. And hey, we all have. If you are my age or even maybe slightly younger or older, you lived in a world where you could make lots of mistakes and you wouldn't have to pay for them later. They all weren't recorded with smartphones, and you don't have to relive them. You can outgrow your immaturity and some of the bad things that you did, and you can still go out there and they can maybe Google you, and it's reasonably clean. That's one of the benefits. But for the kids today, for those darn pesky kids that just have the Twitters and the Instagrams, it's going to be really hard, really, really hard. Well, Google and the government in Europe said, well, we will do this. We can take people off. But who's going to be the new revisionists in history? I think one of the problems, the biggest problem that I have is that it's not just individuals. They're going to want to erase themselves. It's people like Jeffrey Epstein, pedophile, buddy of Bill Clinton, that had a private island where he was raping children, and Bill Clinton and Hillary has spent weekends there. So Jeffrey Epstein's just one of many, many, many people that would love for the internet to forget him. Okay, and so would Hillary in her 2016 campaign, and so would most of the bad actors that give money to the Clinton Global Initiative. And I only bang on Hillary Clinton because she's the most exciting thing that the Republicans and Democrats have seen in a long, long time. But the misdeeds of people in government, the misdeeds of criminals, those are the people that are going to have the most interest in erasing their histories, scrubbing their past. Google's also doing some interesting things here in the U.S. They're pushing for the real surveillance reform. They and everybody else kind of jumps ship on the USA Freedom Act. And the USA Freedom Act is pretty much what you would expect. Orwellian doublespeak, an Orwellian name for an act that doesn't give you freedom and pertains not just to the USA. This from Tech Dirt. As we've mentioned, the USA Freedom Act, which had been the quote-unquote good bill to reform some of the NSA's domestic spying activities, was completely watered down right before it passed the House. Basically, the entire civil liberties community pulled their support for the bill at the last moment once they saw the changes that the White House demanded, even after the bill had already been watered down. What got a little less attention was that many in the tech industry had also dropped their support for the bill despite earlier supporting it. That's what happens, You get behind Obama, you're like, man, he's doing something good, man. This is how Matt Damon and all of the Hollywood elite that have now abandoned Obama and his Hollywood starstruck wife figured out. Maybe we shouldn't support this guy because he's not actually going to do what he's going to say he's going to do. So you had a bunch of these tech companies that are taking a real hit in the real world, that are finding less and less avenues for their products, and their reputations being tossed into the mud. They're finding that, well, they did it once again by supporting this bill that is completely atrocious. They pulled their support, but the media did not tell people that their support was pulled, and it didn't matter because it was already going through anyway. So with the fight to fix the bill now moving to the Senate, Google has apparently decided to ramp up its activism once again on getting a much better bill out there. Google's main Twitter account announced that it wants real reform and linked people to a Take Action page that basically trashes the White House bill that it once supported. And this is a great way for Google to try to save face. It's trying to, because, at the end of the day, their business is collating data. That's what they do. Why wouldn't they want to collate more data for the U.S. government? Why wouldn't they want to have that information? It's one of the few ways that they can actually commodify and sell data. So, how do I say this? I think that Google's full of shit. I don't think that they care at all, and the real reform is just a way to show that they aren't evil, because people are starting to wonder if Google is evil. Well, I wanted to mention a few other things before we get out of here. It's something that I thought was pretty funny. Richard Clarke, he's had a change of heart. If you haven't heard about this, he was recently on Democracy Now! He's a... hold on. Don't do that. There we go. Perfect. He was a crony under Bush. He was the national coordinator for security and counterterrorism under the Bush regime, under Cheney. He resigned in 2003 following the Iraq invasion and later made headlines by accusing Bush officials of ignoring pre-9/11 warnings about the imminent attack on al-Qaeda. So every once in a while you get somebody that's, he's willing to push the agenda. He was all in on counterterrorism. Then once he saw what was happening with the invasion of Iraq based on bogus information, lackluster evidence, and really the word of a bunch of generals, that Iraqi general defectors that had been spies and assets for the CIA for many years. I mean, he saw right through this, and the Bush administration was able to get him, Richard Clarke that is, to buy into the whole war on terror by putting somebody who has a great reputation, somebody who is, it seems legitimate. They sold him on, a lot of things, 9/11 being an outside job and the need to go to Afghanistan, where almost no one was really the nationals that conducted the event, the attacks of 9/11, were from, and attacking a sovereign state because they were harboring bin Laden. Anyway, it's worth playing. If you haven't heard it, we're going to take a listen. And if you have, you can skip 2 minutes and 3 seconds ahead. Here's Amy Goodman talking about the Bush regime, and it's got to really blow some people's heads. How can Obama support this? I don't know how many of those people are actually out there still. They're just insane, more than likely. They're just buying whatever's being sold. Here we go.
In a Democracy Now! Exclusive, the nation's former top counterterrorism official has said he believes President George W. Bush is guilty of war crimes for launching the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Richard Clarke served as national coordinator for security and counterterrorism during President Bush's first year in office. He resigned in 2003 following the Iraq invasion and later made headlines by accusing Bush officials of ignoring pre-9/11 warnings about an imminent attack by al-Qaeda. On Tuesday, Richard Clarke spoke to Democracy Now! In an interview that will air next week. Do you think President Bush should be brought up on war crimes and Vice President Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld for the attack on Iraq?
I think things that they authorized probably fall within the area of war crimes. Whether that would be productive or not, I think, is a discussion we could all have. But we have established procedures now with the International Criminal Court in The Hague where people who take actions as serving presidents or prime ministers of countries have been indicted and have been tried. So the precedent is there to do that sort of thing. And I think we need to ask ourselves whether or not it would be useful to do that in the case of members of the Bush administration. It's clear that things that the Bush administration did, in my mind at least, it's clear that some of the things they did were war crimes.
All right, so there you go. Now, the question is, should you punish people? Would it be productive? I think that's a good question. Is it productive to punish people for arbitrarily, silly crimes? Is it? Should you attack people and ruin their lives over, a few silly decisions? Well, people have, and the state does. The question now is, and why he will never be tried, is whether or not it would be productive. One of the things I just want to briefly mention was Olmert, the previous Israeli prime minister, was indicted and spending 6 years behind bars. And I just have to give them credit for at least seeing through some of the criminality, the obvious fleecing of taxpayers, and some of the horrible things that he did, and they were empowered enough to go after somebody of that stature. And that's what we lack here. I think that if the United States, this is the way they think about it, was to go after Bush and Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and other war criminals in The Hague, that it would diminish the power and it would only enable the enemies of the United States. And they would be right, but that's why the government, it's a perfect example of why the government doesn't always do what is right and only selectively cares about criminality. When it comes to Wall Street bankers, should we go after them? Well, I don't know if it would be productive. I don't know. It might take away the people's faith in the banking system and the Federal Reserve note. Maybe we shouldn't. And the tyranny of good intentions, the complete criminality, and the obvious problems with this philosophy, I think, are highlighted here. Richard Clarke did a great job with highlighting that and trying to couch it as in the real reason that these things are not being prosecuted is because those in power see that as a huge hit to America. Just like Romney said, unabashed, unapologetic. That's the way we have to be. And the last time I saw the government, well, they do apologize from time to time, but the last time something like that happened was Nixon. 72, 73, 74 was the last time we had an environment ripe enough to dislodge somebody from power. And going after Dick Cheney, the guy's on death's doorstep, and Donald Rumsfeld's like 130. And you could find tons of war crimes that all of these guys committed together. Go back to Panama. Go back to Iran-Contra. There's tons of war crimes and blood that can be laid at Donald Rumsfeld's feet. Same thing with Dick Cheney. Same thing with even George Bush Sr., who I think you can make even a better case for. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, Fallujah, there's plenty of examples of criminality, and that's why we have the privatization of it. That's why I think that I am more and more in favor of less privatization of war and more central government responsibility, because the obvious problem with privatizing everything is that you do not have any accountability. I've got a couple other things here, but we're way over. The drug money that will be part of the new be part of the new British GDP. They're doing this in Italy. They're doing this in France as well. Illegal sex and drug trade to be included in calculating the GDP. This is when the reality of banking comes to the reality of or virtual reality of money. And the fact that they're doing this really does highlight, number one, I think some honesty. They're saying, look, this is honestly part of our gross domestic product. We have lots of drugs and hookers, and it should be counted. So that's true. It should. It really should. Black markets should be. But it also, the reason that they're doing it highlights why they are in such a desperate way to make the numbers look better, to continue to get those great credit ratings so they can borrow more and more money on the taxpayers' dime. All right, guys, my name's Doug Owen. I am the senior editor of BlacklistedNews.com. You can find out more about this show, and you can support it. We only had Sarah, who came in, who's often one of the great supporters, who comes in often. $19.84. Gotta love it. We're living in it now. 2014. It was only 20 years 30 years too late. So thank you, Sarah, once again. If you would like to support the show, I encourage you to do so. Commercial free, always an interesting take that you're not going to hear anywhere else. I can guarantee you that. Right, wrong, indifferent, you're not going to get this kind of content from anybody else. The reason that we can do it is because we don't have corporate sponsors. We don't have vitality pills. We don't have water filters. We don't have a lot of stuff that other people have. And we don't have listeners that are products. The show's the product, not you. Go to blacklistedradio.com to make your donation today if you can. And if not, support the show by letting people know about it. Follow us on Twitter. Set this as a homepage or whatever you can. We do appreciate it. I'll be back next Saturday morning for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Until then, take care.